When Joseph and Mary arrived in Bethlehem, most likely Joseph went straight to his paternal home and stayed in the guest room. Jewish custom would have demanded that he receive protection and help for himself, and especially his wife Mary, who was pregnant. Some time passed while they were staying with his family, and then it came time for Mary to be delivered. But Bethlehem, like Joseph's family guest room, would have been filled with families and relatives returning for the census. In Joseph's father's house, there would have been no private place for Mary to have her baby because the guest room was filled with relatives. There would be no private place until someone had the bright and compassionate idea to suggest she could have the baby down below, away from the crowded kataluma, the guest room, in the warmth of the storeroom and animal cellar. There, she could have privacy, but still be within the security of the family home. So Jesus was safely born in the city of David, as the angels told the shepherds in Luke 2:11, and laid in a manger or feeding trough for the animals. That a child should be found lying in a manger was unique, and yet it may have reflected not a situation of abandonment and isolation, but one of compassion and protection, and of the order of family life in traditional Jewish society of the first century. It is also interesting to note that the traditional site of Jesus' birth in Bethlehem is in the middle of the city, where the family homes would have stood in antiquity and not in the surrounding countryside.
We sometimes read Luke and we picture Joseph and Mary traveling in the rain on a cold December night, and Mary is in labor and pain, about to deliver this baby, and Joseph frantically walks from door to door, knocking on the Motel 6s of Bethlehem, which there weren't any, of course, trying to find accommodations. But actually, if we really read what Luke has to say, he says they went to Bethlehem, which was Joseph's ancestral home. That means they had extended family there. They were going to a place where they were known and loved and where they would receive hospitality. It also says in the Gospel of Luke, while they were there, the time came for her to be delivered. Now that's a non-specific amount of time. How long were they there before the baby was born? 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months? It could have been 3 or 4 or 5 months. We really don't know. So the picture of them being in a familial setting, surrounded by people who they might know and might help with the delivery, is actually supported both by Luke and by Matthew.
So there are 4 historical and archaeological facts that mark the place where Jesus was born. First, archaeology has shown that the Church of the Nativity was built on the area of the Bethlehem of Jesus' day. Second, the church sits on the top of a hill where typically patriarchal homes were built. Third, there is a cave underneath the Church of the Nativity, which usually would have been used as a storeroom or a place to keep the animals. And fourth, tradition points to a cave in Bethlehem as being the very place where Jesus was born.
The tradition of a site like a birth site like Bethlehem is actually strengthened by the fact that the earliest record that we have of the tradition of Jesus' birthplace goes back to Justin Martyr, who 15 to 20 years after Bethlehem was totally destroyed by Roman armies, said that the pilgrims came to visit a cave, a cavea. If we go there today, it's at the top of a hill, which is just where a patriarchal home would be built, on top of the hill. And patriarchal homes are kept for many generations and kept within the family. So the tradition of Jesus' birthplace there in the middle of the 2nd century is actually extremely close to the time when those homes were still in existence in Bethlehem. So knowing that Jesus was born there, that his family's patriarchal home would have persisted there until their destruction around 137 AD, and then just 15 or 20 years later, Justin Martyr saying that that's where people commemorated his birth, actually brings it into the category of probably being the place where Jesus was born.
We find also that when you go back to the history books and look at Paulinius of Nola, he notes that Hadrian, who was the Roman emperor from around 117 to 138 AD, built a sacred grove to Adonis over the site of Jesus' birth to efface Christianity. And this was the very purpose of Roman religion, to supersede previous religions. So indeed, they recognized already that something very dramatic in the case of Christianity that occurred at that spot. And then we have, at the beginning of the 4th century, Helena, the mother of Constantine, coming to identify the spot that tradition says Jesus was born. And she identifies that place today as the Church of the Nativity, built on the foundations that she laid. Then in 385 AD, St. Jerome comes to that spot to be there to translate the Vulgate. And yet he says already in the time of his arrival, it's the most venerable spot on earth. So these things together point to the fact that from earliest antiquity, Bethlehem was the one place noted in the Christian world as the birthplace of Jesus.